was, in a world that is increasingly flat, I think anyone who fancies a career in banking, will probably not be limiting themselves just to, the Nigerian banking industry. We're all, global citizens. So in terms of, market capitalization of the global banking industry, 8.87 trillion US dollars as at Q1 2020. Total assets under management estimated at about $124 trillion as of 2019. In terms of the size of the global financial services market, that's a bit difficult to estimate. I think the World Bank only, collates data from about 189 countries, and the data providers not all use the sort of same definitions in terms of what constitutes, financial services, but I think that's estimated to reach about 26.5 trillion US dollars by 2022. That estimate may have been thrown off balance a bit by the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think the last thing I just want to say here is that if you recall the 2008 global financial crisis, I presume a lot of you would have read up about it. That was one of the most significant events of the last 30 years, just in terms of the impact globally, resulted in millions of homes being foreclosed, resulted in millions of jobs being lost, resulted in major global economies contracting. And I think that event, if anyone was in doubt about the strategic importance or the systemic importance of the banking sector, financial services industry to the global economy, I think the global financial crisis cleared all of such doubts. Now, coming home to Nigeria, I tell people that sometimes the best way of appreciating the role of banks is looking at it from a sort of from a very personal view. So you can let's forget about all the statistics on the slide for now. I think if there's any bank in Nigeria, and their digital channels such as mobile banking, and their ATMs, go down, you can bet that within a couple of hours that bank's name will be trending on Twitter. I hope we're still allowed to talk about Twitter, by the way. So just from that personal experience in terms of what banking channels being down, what it does to us as individuals, how it disrupts our lives, that's just a pointer to how important banks are. But looking at some of the statistics as well, again, the very interesting ones. The Nigerian banking industry is the second largest in sub-Saharan Africa, only behind South Africa. Contribution of the financial services sector to the Nigerian GDP in 2020 was about 3.36%, which is very large, for a non-oil service sector. Total assets of the banking industry about 47.82 trillion as of June 2020. If you look at the top 10 largest companies by market capitalization on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, 3 of them are banks. If we extend that to the top 20, 8 of them are banks. So again, showing you how big Nigerian banks are relative to other companies in the Nigerian economy. And we have close to 95,000 employees employed by this sector as at Q2 2020. So again, just some interesting facts and figures. Now let's get into the meat of it. What do banks do? It might seem like a fairly obvious question, and I'm sure everyone here has a sense of what banks do. But the reality is, if we what we probably think banks do, or what we know banks do, is probably just scratching the surface. The diversity of products and services that banks provide to wide variety of customers, it ranges across quite a number of things. And what I tried to do on this slide was just to try and show you the breadth. So on the one hand, we have retail banking, which as individuals is probably one of the services and products that you individually utilize the most. We have your accounts that you open, savings accounts, current accounts, personal loans you take from banks. if you were going to buy a house, mortgages, your debit and credit cards, insurance for your assets, vehicle and asset finance where you want to get finance to purchase a car or some other sort of assets, wealth management, and then of course, your foreign exchange needs. And that's retail banking. Now, if we move on to SME, which is small and medium enterprises or business or corporate banking, a whole wide range of things as well. Trade finance, guarantees, letters of credit, working capital for companies, who need capital, for buying stock and buying inventory and buying, materials and expanding, overdrafts, collections, payments, for corporates again, payroll, merchant services, with their distributors and suppliers, distributor financing, supplier financing, invoice discounting, a wide range of services, that banks provide to businesses and corporates. Now we're now moving into things slightly more sophisticated. Now investment banking, which is where I started, when I first joined the bank. Now we're talking about term loans, more structured products. We're talking of financial advisory. Companies want to merge. A company wants to acquire another business. A company wants to do a restructuring. They want to spin off one of their subsidiaries into one of their units or departments into a standalone subsidiary. They want to make a major corporate acquisition. We have financial advisory teams who provide financial advisory services to such clients. We have the debt and equity capital market. A company wants to do an IPO. They want to raise equity from the public, or they want to issue a bond, or they want to issue commercial paper. So whether it's equity instruments or debt instruments, corporates always want to access the capital markets, which gives them wider sort of pool or source of capital than your traditional bank financing. You have real estate financing. You want to build a mall, you want to build an office complex, you want to build a warehouse, an industrial complex, and all of that requires financing. These are very structured products we're talking about. Of course, we talk about project and infrastructure financing as well. Your bridges, your tolled roads, your refineries, your fertilizer plants, all the projects, structuring that goes into that. And then, of course, structured trade finance as well. So these are just some examples of investment banking products that investment banks provide to clients. Then we move on into the world of derivatives, swaps, forwards, repurchase transactions, all the very exotic, sophisticated instruments, that banks, enter into or trade with their clients. And then, of course, there's also the asset management element. Now we're talking about investments, how banks manage their investments, whether it's through mutual funds or exchange traded funds, just even helping people, high net worth individuals, to manage their investment portfolio or to give them investment advice. Then, of course, we're moving into digital banking, which you're all familiar with, your online banking, your mobile banking. And then, outside of all of this, there's a broad range of other financial services that could be provided by financial services group. And my employer, for instance, Stanbic IBTC, we're a financial services group. So we don't just have the bank, we also have a subsidiary that does pensions, Stanbic IBTC pensions, there's insurance, there's stockbroking, there's trustees, there's asset management. So there's a whole wide range, of other financial services that, banks, if we use it in a more loose sense, financial, services firms, provide. So this just gives you, a bit of, sort of wider spectrum of what exactly banks do. Now let's bring it home. So, within a bank, what exactly is the role of a lawyer? And that's what this slide speaks to. Of course, banks will enter into all sorts of contracts, spanning across all these different, products and services I talked about. So, of course, the lawyers will be involved, in drafting, reviewing, and negotiating those contracts. Banks, our bread and butter really is, giving loans. So we give loans, and for loans that are going to be secured, we enter into security documentation. So again, drafting, review, and negotiation of such documentation, ensuring that those security documents are perfected and the interests of the bank are adequately protected. Then, of course, a lot of transaction structuring, and we'll see this a lot, in investment banking. You're structuring deal, how you're going to structure the deal, what are the legal implications of structuring this way, tax law advice, financial assistance advice. There's quite a lot of elements of structuring and and advice that lawyers would give. Then a huge part of what we do, is regulatory compliance. Banks operate in a highly regulated environment. It's a very, very, very highly regulated environment. Now, for the big, for the big banks and the very large, corporates that also operate in regulated environments, typically they will have separate compliance functions. So they might have a legal department that is separate from the compliance department. But then again, you have lawyers within the compliance teams, and even the lawyers and the legal team as well. They are often involved in advising on regulatory compliance as well. Then we get to litigation, which is the very, very interesting aspect, and which I would say is the bane of the existence of some of my colleagues who are in the litigation team. I think there's this perception, there's this sort of general perception that banks have a lot of money. So for that reason, banks are often on the receiving end of a lot of frivolous and opportunistic litigation. A lot of people see banks as soft targets. So all that needs to happen is for them to put their ATM card in the machine and for the machine to swallow their ATM card. And next thing they filed they filed a writ, asking for damages. So banks need very experienced litigators working for them. The litigation portfolio can be huge. Those litigation risks are very concerning sometimes, and it's important that banks adequately identify and mitigate and manage those risks. Now, because of the rules of professional conduct, the lawyers that are employed by the bank, that are in the legal department themselves, they can't represent their employers in those matters, so they'll have to engage external solicitors. But the lawyers, in-house lawyers, have responsibility for managing the litigation portfolio and engaging and liaising with the external counsel who are engaged to represent the banks in these matters. Then, of course, there's debt recovery. Again, a very interesting one. I tell people that I think it's human nature not to want to pay back loans that people borrow. So banks often find themselves pursuing debt recovery actions against recalcitrant customers who have defaulted. So again, the strategy, there's a lot of thinking that goes into what strategy to pursue, what actions to file, how to pursue and how to realize the most recoveries in the shortest period of time, and at the least expense to you also, as an institution. Then of course there's general legal advice. You're advising the procurement team, you're advising human capital. Employment issues come up, human capital wants advice. Your IT people are entering into IT contracts, they want advice. There's a wide range of general legal advisory that you're going to be doing as a lawyer, working with a bank or a financial institution. And then of course there's governance, so just things around corporate governance. Again, the big banks will typically have a separate governance team. Sometimes they merge them. They might have a head of legal who doubles as company secretary. Sometimes they separate those roles, just giving the huge responsibilities that go with governance for big corporates, particularly those that are publicly listed corporates. There's a lot of regulatory compliance, a lot of filings, a lot of disclosures that have to be made to the NSC, to the SEC, to the CBN, and other regulators. So governance is a big part of what lawyers in the bank do as well. Now let's get into preparing for a career as a lawyer in banking. Of course, the basic qualifications you should have are your Bachelor of Law, your LLB, and of course being admitted to the Nigerian bar to practice as a barrister or solicitor. If you're considering a career in a financial institution outside of Nigeria, depending on the institution and depending on the rules of that jurisdiction, you might need to be qualified as a solicitor as well as an attorney locally in that jurisdiction. Additional qualifications are good, postgraduate degrees, but I wouldn't necessarily say they're a prerequisite. They could be an advantage, particularly when you're then looking towards specializing, in a particular field. And maybe here, maybe I'll just share, some advice, that I give, younger people, when I talk to them, when people ask me particularly about, okay, I want to do an LLM, how soon should I do it? Like, when I was talking about myself earlier on, I shared how, I did a master's, right after my NYSC. And, hindsight is 2020 vision, with the benefit of hindsight, I realized that I probably shouldn't have done the master's then. Someone I speak to, and again, the way he describes it is, you say you want to do a master's degree. What are you mastering? A master's degree itself connotes that you want to master something. So, having just been fresh out of school, freshly qualified, maybe fresh out of NYC, do you have sufficient experience to determine whether this is what you then want to specialize in? Maybe not. Again, for the people who are very, very meticulous and very organized and very planned, maybe they even at that stage, they'll know what they want to do. But I generally say, people should exercise caution. I know that for a lot of people, they want to get these qualifications out of the way. Again, no hard and fast rules. Do what works for you. But I think there's some merit in, acquiring some experience, which then gives you a sort of a wider, wider view of all the different, dimensions and aspects to law practice, which can then help you form your view as to what you want to, specialize in, or what you want to get a master's degree in. Again, you don't have to always get an LLM. It could be an MSc in finance. It could be an MBA, if you're so minded. And then, of course, diplomas and certifications, there are loads and loads of them outside there. And there's no end to learning. So you could do diplomas or certifications in finance or in capital markets. Those are always, very, very useful, additional qualifications you could acquire. Now, what kind of work experience is required, for someone who wants to pursue a career as a lawyer in banking? Again, what I recommend is don't go in-house. And this applies not just to banking, this applies almost across board. Don't go in-house immediately after qualifying as a lawyer. And why would I say so? I think there's a lot of value in first working with a good law firm. I would say typically, a law firm that has a strong corporate and commercial law practice. If they have specialized, practice areas, I would say preferably, their banking and finance or capital markets practice area. If you are going to be joining a bank's litigation team, it would be very good to have gotten some experience, in the dispute resolution, practice of a good, litigation law firm as well, or it could be a corporate and commercial law firm that has a good dispute resolution practice. And what's the reason for this? You need to cut your teeth. You need to learn the ropes. Law firms will give you a certain depth and breadth, that you don't want to miss out on, particularly in the early stages of your career. So I typically would recommend, a minimum of, 2 to 3 years, first working, in a law firm before you then, go in-house and, then join, the legal department of the bank, if that's what, you're interested in, career-wise. It's really about learning the ropes, and paying your dues and acquiring that expertise, and like I said, acquiring or being exposed to that breadth and depth, of transactional legal practice. Now, it could also be other financial services firms, so you could start off in a law firm, and then before you join a bank, you could join an insurance company or a pensions company, some other financial services firms, again, that's good experience to have. And then, of course, you can also get experience through secondment, and there are loads and loads of secondment opportunities available. And we'll get to, internships and secondments, a bit further down in the presentation. I specifically mentioned the International Lawyers for Africa, IFLA here. Please, Google it, read about it. When you graduate and start working, that's something, you may want to pursue. I think it provides as much as a 3-month or maybe a 2-month, secondment opportunity with top law firms, in the UK and I think the US. So that's also, very good experience to have under your belt. either before you join, bank as a lawyer, or even during the process of, working in the legal department of the bank. Now, in terms of preparing for a career as a lawyer in banking, now what kind of skill sets do you require? And I've put a few of them here, and I'll touch on some of them. Some of them are pretty obvious. There's no job in the world here where you don't need good, drafting and communication skills, particularly a legal job. As in-house, lawyers in the bank, there's a lot of drafting is done internally. Again, banks, are also looking to cut down on costs. So drafting skills are key. Communication skills, so important. You're interfacing with clients, interfacing with your internal stakeholders, your business stakeholders. It's very important that you're communicating at the right levels, and people understand what you're saying. People don't want legalese. They don't want legal jargon. They want to know what the issues are, and segueing into my next point. People also want problem solvers. I tell people that the best lawyers are the lawyers who solve problems. It's not so much what the law is. Anybody can advise what the law is. But the best lawyers really are the ones who say, well, this is the law. This is the legal impediment to what you're trying to do. But here's the solution. Here's the way we can do it that falls, within the confines of the laws and regulations. Then, of course, decision making. You're going to have to make some hard decisions and quick decisions as well. Banking is hype, very fast-paced, high-volume sort of business. People want, if you're stalling to make decisions, in the blink of an eye, you may have lost the customer to a competitor. So you have to have, the confidence and the ownership for being able to make tough decisions. Sometimes not all the decisions you make, will be palatable. There are times where, your business stakeholders will not like the decisions you make, but then you have to make them and you have to stand by them. Attention to detail is very critical. The devil is always in the detail. The difference sometimes between a multi-million or a billion naira or even $1 million, litigation, sometimes, it could be a knot, the word knot that wasn't supposed to be somewhere, or that was supposed to be somewhere and was missing. There's all sorts of interesting, case law, about where seemingly little things have led to huge consequences. So attention to detail, is very key. Then, of course, negotiation skills. I cannot overemphasize this. Banking is all about deal making. So you're negotiating agreements, you're negotiating transactions. You have clients who are very sophisticated, who push back, very strongly on, and who will always, of course, try and negotiate the most favorable terms for themselves. So you have to be able to know when to cut the deal. You have to know when to stand firm. You have to know when to draw a line and say, no, this is not acceptable. You have to know when to compromise and when to make concessions. And you also have to know when to trade. When to make a bargain. When to say, okay, well, if you give me this, I'll give you this, and everybody walks away happy. So bargaining and negotiation, very important skill to have as well. Financial literacy is so important. One of the things that that upsets me the most, is when I see a lawyer that is not financially literate, and then the lawyer is advising on the transaction, and he doesn't want to look at the numbers. He doesn't want to look at accounts. He doesn't want to look at financial covenants. He says, oh, that's not the lawyer's problem. That's for the bankers. That's for the financial advisors. I think it's intellectual laziness. Now more than ever before, we have all the resources you need, to be financially literate. And we're going to I'll touch on that a bit more in terms of things you can do, just to get financially literate. Unfortunately, when I was going to school, back then they used to say, oh, lawyers, people chose law because they didn't like mathematics. Unfortunately, it's unfortunate that was what it was, but it shouldn't be. Nobody's saying you have to be a rocket scientist, or a physicist, or understand fundamental mathematics. No, but you shouldn't run away from numbers. You shouldn't run away from financial analysis. And these are areas where you can actually read up and acquire knowledge, and I'll strongly encourage that, to the students on this call. Intellectual curiosity, very, very closely related to that. And then the last one here is just commercial mindedness. I think it's so important that as lawyers, you have to be commercially minded. You can't be a lawyer working in the bank and then, you're rigid, and yes, you only see things through the prism, in black and white. What does the law say? And you don't want to think outside of the box. Deals have to be done. And I tell my team, all the time, that at the end of the day, all these agreements we are negotiating, all these calls we are getting on, they're spending hours negotiating contracts. At the end of the day, the clients don't really care about it. What do they want? They want a product or a service from the bank. That's all it is. It's only because we need to document contractually, those products or those services. That's why we're even having those conversations with them. So commercial mindedness, is very key. Now, this slide talks about professional affiliations and accreditations. Again, when you complete your studies and graduate and qualify as lawyers, please tap into this. One of the things I notice about in-house lawyers, once people go in-house, they become very insular. They get shut away from the bar, from the Nigerian Bar Association. And it's such a terrible, it's such a mistake we make. And I'm guilty myself, and that's something I've been working on deliberately and consciously to stay connected. The section of business law of the NBA, it's one of the most vibrant that I know. They're constantly organizing continuing education courses, constantly organizing conferences, constantly organizing seminars and workshops. You need to tap into this. There's a Capital Market Solicitors Association as well. There's a Loan Market Association. When you join, if you decide to pursue a career in banking and you join, banks, please get your organizations. Don't forget, get your organizations, to sign up to these associations, to register. There are loads of benefits that members of these associations have. For derivatives, we have the ISDA, and then of course for capital markets as well, we have ICMA. So these are very, very important professional associations that you should please tap into. Okay, now this is I would say the meat of what I want to talk to you about today. What steps can you already start taking? Because it's easy to say, why do I have to bother about this? I'm only in my second or third year. I still have a long way to go. But that will be a mistake. And I'm really glad you guys turned up and in good numbers tonight. I think it's really, evidence of, how forward thinking, you are. So there are things you can start doing already from today. Don't wait. Absolutely not. Internships is for me so important. And when I was in school, I didn't have this opportunity, and it's one of these I still regret. And it was for lack of knowledge. There were people in Unilag, who had been doing internships with Alukwamiye Bode and Banwa and Ighodalo, even whilst I was in school. Now internships are so much more, widespread. There's hardly any law firm worth its salt that doesn't have a formal, internship program. Please research into this, make phone calls, send people emails, get connected on LinkedIn, send people and tell them you're interested in doing internships during your holidays. Again, mentorship with professionals in the industry, very important. And don't be daunted. You can reach out to someone and the person turns you down because he already has commitment. Don't be discouraged about that. There are other people who might be willing to mentor you. I think it's very important that you form and establish mentorship relationships, whether formal or informal, with professionals in the industry, because then you already start learning, the tricks of the trade, very, very early on. Then, of course, there's social and professional networks. LinkedIn, very, very good tool. In fact, your teacher and I, we connected, via LinkedIn. So please, don't wait until you are employed before you set up a LinkedIn profile. Absolutely not. You have students who have LinkedIn profiles. You are, in a sense, professionals, or aspiring professionals, in your own right. Also, leverage on your law student associations, your LSS, the chambers. Back when I was in Ife, we had justice chambers and equity chambers, and very, very vibrant organizations who were constantly organizing lectures and symposia and all of that, which were very good opportunities to get to meet other lawyers and connect with people. So please make use of these opportunities. Then, of course, this is the one I said I was going to touch on a bit later. I mentioned it earlier on. Again, going back to financial literacy, stay informed. Some of get subscribe to magazines. Yes, some of them might be a bit expensive, but it's money well spent. There's Financial Times. There's there's The Economist. There's there's Business Day, which we have Nigeria. Subscribe to some of these magazines. You'll be amazed at just how much information they provide. Just giving you insights into world economies, into politics, into into what's happening in the world. So please make use of these avenues as well. And there's Investopedia. It's no longer an excuse not to understand what a financial term or a certain terminology means. Just put it in Investopedia. You find out what it means very easily. Now my last slide, which is why choose a career as a lawyer in banking. So this is me now trying to sell banking to you. So a couple of things. One, the fear a lot of people have with going in-house is that they get bored, or that they won't find it challenging enough, or that it becomes stifling. So in fact, I find it very funny when lawyers are having conversation, and people say, "Are you practicing?" And what they mean by are you practicing in the law firm? And I'm like, okay, those of us in-house, we're practicing as well, only in a different capacity. But trust me, those concerns don't arise with banking. And that was why I spent a bit of time just touching on, the breadth of banking, the wide range of products and services. We're talking of complex transactions, interesting transactions, investment banking, derivatives, very challenging and intellectually, stimulating stuff, So that's one reason. Again, there's also, a potential for specialization, because it cuts across so many things. You can decide, what, I'm going to be a derivative specialist. And talking about derivatives particularly, that's one area where there's a huge opportunity. There are very few derivative lawyers in Nigeria. There's a huge market waiting there. And derivatives are not going anywhere. If anything, they're only going to get more complex, more sophisticated. So there's always going to be need for for lawyers to to get involved in this. Then my third bullet point here, in terms of the workforce of the future, and this is a very interesting one. As you guys know, the world is constantly evolving. I'm just keeping an eye on the timing. Okay, I need to be rounding up now. The workforce of the banks in the future, it's going to be data scientists, it's going to be data analysts, it's going to be behavioral psychologists, and this is just because of innovation, because of artificial intelligence, because of predictive analytics, all of these things. But the reality is there would always be a role for lawyers there. So lawyers aren't one of those jobs that AI or innovation is going to make extinct anytime. If anything, it's just going to give us the right tools we need, to do our work better, to work faster, to work more efficiently. It's not going to take away our roles. Again, there are emerging opportunities for lawyers with innovation. There's increasingly, cyber risk and financial crime is becoming increasingly, a big problem. There's going to be, legal advice needed on that. Also, data integrity and analytics. People are going to require legal advice around that. Then, of course, a career as a lawyer in banking, it's a stable and progressive, career. When I was talking about myself earlier, I said I've spent 10 years. It just feels like yesterday. I've done different things, investment banking. Now I'm doing, much wider than investment banking. Now I do derivatives. Now I do trade finance. So there's lots of opportunities for growth, and diversity and specialization, like I mentioned earlier on, in banking. And lastly, but not the least, money is also important. Remuneration is competitive. Yes, maybe banks won't pay as well as certain industries, but banks are still fairly up there just in terms of competitive remuneration. So again, this goes back to providing you with a platform for a stable and and progressive professional career. So that's it from me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I hope you found that interesting. If nothing else, I hope it's stirred some curiosity and got you thinking. And I'll be happy to take any questions at this stage. Thank you so much.
I want to say A very big thank you to you, Mr. Bella, for coming on. How I wish I knew this when I was still an undergrad. I would probably be very rich now. Uh, and Clinton would be respecting me. Clinton would have been respecting me more. These students they don't shake when they see me. All right. So I want to thank you. That was very insightful. And part of what I intend to achieve with the class like this is to have the students know, expand their mind so they can become more deliberate in planning their future. And I've
Absolutely.
noticed that is one thing that is lacking in this country. People can complain, people can say many bad things, but they don't want to do anything. There are no proactive actions they take. Is all these, I believe, in kind of divine will and all that. So when
Yeah.
they see some of these things you've talked about, a prudent student can plan his life, can start opening his eyes to what he can do to better his career. And before the students ask you their questions, I want to ask you a few things. When you were talking about the skill set necessary for a lawyer in banking, I noticed that you didn't put the requirement of a first class.
Because it's not a requirement.
Okay.
But it's a good to have. It will definitely give you an advantage over a lot of other CVs or applications.
Okay. I want to put it out there because there is this pressure on students as if um, you must have that kind of grade to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
When, for example, I want you to also talk about it. Do you think that if, for example, a student has had experience through internships and just being able to craft a good CV, that he stands a good chance?
Okay, so thanks, and that's a very good question, and this is how I would approach it. What a good degree, so a first class or a 2-1, what it does for you is it gets you into the room, and it gets you into the room ahead of other people. So I tell people that a good first degree is probably its utility or its most value. You see it in the first 5 years post qualification.
Mhm.
So it has its advantage. I mean, by all means, if you can get a good grade of degree, pursue it with everything you can. But don't pursue it at the expense of other things. So there's that role for balance.
Mm.
Social skills, interpersonal skills, as every bit as important as academic qualifications. The reality of the country we live in as well is jobs are hard to come by. So for many organizations, the easiest filtering tool they use is minimum qualification 2-1. Is the easiest thing because that already eliminates maybe another 10,000 CVs or applications you'll have gotten. So Nigeria has its challenges. Like the job market makes academic qualifications more important in this market, perhaps than they should ordinarily be. But if even for people who don't have good academic qualifications, having gotten solid internship experience, being intellectually curious, having good social skills, and let me talk a bit about social skills. It took me a while as a lawyer to realize that the most successful lawyers are not the ones who know the, the most law or who can argue the most the best arguments. They're the lawyers who know the most people, who walks into a room and they're talking with this one and they know that person, because it's all about getting deals, getting briefs, at the end of the day, in terms of building your earning revenue and building your client base. So social skills are so important. And internships, it just gets you into that corporate setting. Already as a student, you're already seeing how workplaces, how they function. You're already understanding the work culture, the work ethics. from that time, you're already developing relationships, with lawyers in those firms, which are very, very valuable relationships that will serve you well. So, I hope I've been able to answer the question.
Thank you so much for that. And I just want to state for the records, nobody in banking gets less than a 2-1. That's the record we've kept. So, but one of the things I'm looking at is the ability of the students to understand that they can go beyond looking for results to also look for connections,
Absolutely.
which are fundamental for when they leave the university.
Absolutely.
I'll ask you one more question before I take what the students have to say, since I see kind of a number of hands going up. If somebody wants to be financially literate, starting from point zero, what do you advise that person to do? I saw it in one of your points.
Yes. Thanks. It's a very good question as well. And I think, sometimes, people find it daunting, starting from ground zero. They're like, I don't know anything about, accounts or financial statements, or the financial sector. So I think, sometimes that's, the scale of, what is at hand sometimes then pushes people away and they don't even want to be interested. So I think the way to start is, start with general interest stuff. If one of my favorite magazines is the Economists. It's one of the most reader friendly, well written magazines that I've ever read, and there's so much there. So there's stuff about the politics in the US and the UK. There's stuff about the economics. There's stuff about what banks, the Reserve Bank in the US is doing regarding interest rates. Just wide range of articles. So things like the Economist, the Financial Times. Whenever you can lay your hands on those things, read them. Then of course there's also the play Google Plays. Google is like I say is everyone's best friend. You come across something you don't understand, someone you went to a seminar or you saw a financial terminology that was not familiar, just Google it. You'll be amazed at how much information there is about it. So I think the starting point is just being curious, reading, developing a reading habit, not just fiction, but also reading journals and reading magazines. There's a lot of information online. Twitter has always been a very, very, very important source of information for me. So I think those are some of the tools I would encourage someone who's looking to be more financially literate. And again, there's no, it's a journey. It's not, you're not going to arrive at the destination in one day. It's just little building blocks. Acquiring more and more and more information about these things over time. That's the trick.
Thank you so much for that. Now I will take a question from Bright Okonkwo. Bright Okonkwo, you raised your hand. Do you want to say anything?
No, sir, it was actually a mistake. I'm sorry.
All right, no problem. Clinton, do you want to ask a question?
Oh, definitely, sir. I want to.
Okay, please go for it.
Yeah, so Mr. Olutola Bella, thank you very much for the session. It was very insightful and remarkable. We indeed appreciate you. But then first and foremost, my question is if a law student is currently working on having an ICANN certification, does that imply an added advantage to such a person in the banking sector? That's the first question.
Okay.
And the second question, okay, should I continue, sir?
Yeah, you can ask both, and then I'll take them one after the other.
Oh, okay. And then, yeah, personally, I am very much interested in turning with Stanbic IBTC Holdings PLC, but I do not know how I can start my application. What advice would you give, sir?
Okay. Thank you so much, Clinton, for the question. So let me start with the first one. ICANN certification, I think is good. Now, I wouldn't recommend that someone who ordinarily isn't considering a career in accounting should go and pursue, getting, becoming a chartered accountant simply as an added qualification because he wants to pursue, a career as a lawyer in banking. But if you're already doing that, by all means, and let me tell you why, accounting is one of the things lawyers are most notorious for not understanding. In fact, a couple of years ago, I had to buy a book called Accounting for Lawyers, which was very interesting. And the thing about accounting, having some background in accounting is it's so useful. If you're going to be in the boardroom, you're going to be a director of a company, or you're even going to be in the C-suite. You're going to be an executive, or you're going to be a general counsel, advising C-suite executives. You're going to need to have some understanding of balance sheets. You're going to be able to read a company's financial statements and understand profitability and all the profit and loss and and all of these accounting terms and terminologies. So I think it's very useful information to have. Of course, the only way of acquiring that is not by becoming a chartered accountant. I mean, the level of the depth of knowledge and expertise that a chartered accountant has is way more than what you would need for the purposes I just described. But then again, there are books you can read, there are courses you can attend. There's accounting for non-accounting professionals. There are books, courses, certifications. I think having an elementary or a basic knowledge of accounting and accounting principles, I think is always a useful tool for not just a lawyer, but any professional working in the financial services industry to have. Then, in terms of internship with Stanbic, we used to have a program. I would need, and we can connect on LinkedIn. I would need to check whether that's still running. Again, because of the pandemic and the disruptions, people now working mostly from home. I think that program may have been disrupted. So that, we used to have a program where we used to take on interns. I think it's called the Blue Interns Program. I'll need to check just regarding what the current status of that is, and I can if we connect via LinkedIn, like I said, I can share that information with you.
Oh, thank you very much. I already sent a connection via LinkedIn.
Fantastic.
And also, sir, do we get the slides of your presentation?
I will share this. I will share the slides with your lecturer. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, sir. Blessing Wankwa, do you want to ask a question? Okay, I'm not sure if Blessing can still hear me. I see another hand here, Precious Adeleke. Do you want to ask a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, sir.
Right.
So thank you very much, Mr. Bella, for everything you've said so far. It has been really interesting listening to you. So I actually have had. Oh, sorry, is someone talking? Okay, sorry. I heard someone talking. That's why I stopped. So I've had a couple of internship experiences in law firms, companies, and currently I work in the financial services sector. And I find that I'm even more interested in finance than in law, and I'm considering a transition. Although I'm still not sure about it, I'm not certain. I'm still thinking about it. But what I wanted to know is that what are the benefits of having a law degree when you want to transition into like a more finance role, probably something in investment banking or in asset management?
Thank you, Precious. That's a very good question, and I should actually have mentioned that. So thank you so much for bringing it up. Now, one of the benefits that a career in law also provides is it's also a very good platform for transitioning to other things, and not just finance, but finance is a very good example. In the institution I work with, which is Stanbic IBTC, which is a subsidiary of Standard Bank, our chief executive, that's of the entire Standard Bank group, is actually a lawyer by training, and there are many of them like that. And I see that everywhere I go. So not just banks, insurance companies, many of the chief executives, are lawyers by training, all sorts. And let me tell you why I think, we see this trend. I think the legal training, by its very nature, it teaches people to be very analytical. It teaches you to interrogate, to probe, So there's this thing that it opens your mind and opens your perspective, that curiosity, right? That ability to, as a lawyer, the first thing you're already looking up for is what can go wrong here. That's that inherent training that we have as lawyers. So a lot of times people find out that training, they find it very useful to apply to other things. And, again, if I look at my classmates, for instance, either, in IFE or even in law school, there's so many people who are currently not working as lawyers. So not just even not practicing in law firms, but they're not working as lawyers. There are people in entertainment, people in health, in the health sector, people in construction, all sorts of things. And there's sometimes people want to look back and think, oh, did I waste all those 5 years and the 1 year in law school, acquiring, a qualification as a lawyer? Absolutely not. That training serves you for life. Like I said, it gives you, it shapes how you view things, how you look at issues, how you look at business, how you look at opportunities. So, if for someone who actually is interested in finance, I think, getting into a bank or a financial services firm, possibly first as a lawyer, even makes, that transition even easier. And you don't necessarily even have to work as a lawyer first. You can qualify and then decide, you want to do an MSc in finance, or want to do some other diplomas or get some other accreditations, in finance, and then decide, you're going to go into investment banking, and then get apply to be hired as an analyst in an investment bank. So there's law, the opportunities within law, and the opportunities that a legal training presents to you, they're limitless, completely limitless. So thank you very much for the question. I hope I've been able to answer it.
Yes, definitely. Yes, thank you very much, sir.
I agree with you that a law degree helps you in everything, even in religious affairs. Now, I think lawyers make the best pastors, isn't it?
Probably. I would agree with that.
All right. So I think I've saw two other hands up. Who may lie or assure?
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So good evening, everyone, and good evening, Mr. Bella. Thank you for I love gatherings like this where people talk about the intersection between law and finance. So I finished from the faculty sometime in 2019. And I knew that this was supposed to be an undergraduate thing, but I just had to join because I currently work at a securities trading firm. So you can just say that I've completely switched into a finance role. But so I haven't gone to law school, and I'm currently doing my NYSC, right? And so that ideally you're supposed to go to law school before you do NYSC. But because there was a delay in the law school processing, Corona and everything, with OAU delay, so I couldn't go to law school, and then I decided to start NYSC. So my question is, because I've started NYSC and I know that I do not want to work in a law firm, I want to continue to build my finance career, do my MSc in finance. Do you think that it's necessary for me to still go to law school since I'm already in the industry?
That's a very, very interesting question. And I'll give you my advice, but ultimately I think you need to follow, your guts, and make the decision you think is right for yourself. But I'll share my own advice. I think that having, gotten a law degree, right? I think I would advise that you still go to law school, despite the fact that you already have that certainty of mind that finance is what you want to do. And it's very good to have clarity and certainty. I mean, at your age, I had no such certainty or clarity. Even now, I'm not even sure whether I even do. So it's a very good thing. You're lucky to have that. The caveat to that, though, is the world is constantly evolving. And as individuals, we're also constantly evolving. You might very well think, finance is what I want to do. You might be set about it today. Who knows what the next 5 years will bring? Who knows what the next 10 years will bring? Who knows whether someday, you might then decide, hey, I want to switch back to law, right? Now, do you want to put yourself in a situation where you are disadvantaged in that you're not qualified as an attorney or admitted as a barrister and solicitor in Nigeria? Maybe not. So again, you need to weigh the options. You need to weigh that 1 year. Is it 1 year? Is the opportunity cost of that 1 year going to law school? What's the opportunity cost of that 1 year? Are you trading 1 year of law school for 1 year of work experience in a financial services firm? If that is what it is that trade-off worth it? So those are some of the considerations you'll give. But again, I think my personal advice will be keep your options open. And the wider the options you have, the better.
And I would like
Thank
to weigh
you.
I would like to weigh in on that because I have a number of students who have studied abroad. They finish immediately, go to do a master's without going to the law school, and from there they sometimes worry, should they come back to do the law school? There are some students that go and do undergraduate degrees outside the country, like in the US or whatever, and they want to know what I think. And I always advise them to do the law school. It's just a year, and you are still young. You have so much ahead of you. As he has said, I don't think it's wise to limit your options. You don't know where you'll be tomorrow. The wisest decision you should be able to make is to go to the law school. All right. I think we'll take one more and then we'll call it a day. I really appreciate you, Mr. Bella, for your patience.
You're welcome. Absolutely, an absolute pleasure.
Okay. Is Blessing one wall here? Okay. I don't
Yes,
have
sir.
it.
I'm here.
Do you want to ask your question now?
Yes, sir. Please.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Bella. Thank you very much for this qualitative session. I have two questions. The first one is on regulatory compliance, which is one of the fields a lawyer can choose to specialize in the banking sector. What I want to ask is, if I decide to focus on regulatory compliance, do I still need to have any sort of background in finance per se, in the actual rudiments of the banking sector, stricto sensu, since all I want to do is just regulatory compliance? And then the second question is related to investment banking. Now we know of the big investment banks, the JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and Merrill Lynch, all of them. My question is, what advice would you give personally for a law student who's trying to get noticed in investment banking? What do you think I need to add or remove perhaps from my CV to fit into the model of investment banking? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very, very good question. So just on the second question, are you looking more at global investment banks or Nigerian investment banks or both?
Global investment banks. But then I think you should extend
Oh,
into Nigerian investment banks too.
okay. Thanks. So let me start with the first question. I think it's the easier one. Now you said, for someone who wants to go into sort of specialize in regulatory compliance, in a bank or a financial services firm, do you then still need to bother with the rudiments, of finance? And let me give you an illustration with derivatives. So, like I said, I used to be an investment banking lawyer, and it was when I took on this current role that was sort of like my first real exposure to the world of derivatives, swaps and forwards, and repos and all these things. And initially I had no clue what they were talking about. Like I'm like, what are all these things? They all just seem so esoteric. Now imagine having to advise on the regulations around those sorts of products. So there's all sorts of EU regulations on initial margining, which deals with which relates to derivatives. Now, if you don't understand how the product works fundamentally, you will struggle. You'll be like, trying to what analogy can I give? You'll be like, trying to draw, without, with a blunt pencil. So the understanding of what the product is, that is what gives the flavor, which then enables you to be able to advise either from a legal or regulatory perspective in relation to that product or service. So, or even if it's regulatory compliance, you still need an understanding of, the rudiments of finance. Now, that's not an understanding you necessarily have to get by, doing core finance or going to go and do an MSc in finance. Absolutely not. It might be, just reading, just general, things you read out of general interest, or things you just things you read out of general interest. So that would be my answer to the first question. That regardless of what type of the kind of role you want to play in a bank or a financial services firm as a lawyer, the knowledge, financial literacy, and the knowledge of the product and the services is always key. Then to the second question about what can you do? How do you get the attention of investment banks? Now, investment banks, by their very nature, and not just the global ones, not just the Goldman Sachs and the Morgan Stanleys of this world, but even the Nigerian ones, they are extremely competitive. You have the best minds, first in class products. Those are the kind of people who are chasing the limited jobs in that area. And it's for a number of reasons. One is for the intellectual challenge. Two is for the prestige. They are prestigious. And three is for the money. They're well paying as well. So they're very competitive. A lot of people, for a lot of people, that's the holy grail. The ultimate destiny. So you are essentially competing against a lot of people to get into those organizations. So how can you equip yourself? What advantage can you give yourself? Again, it's some of the things we've talked about. Internships. Now, even the internships in those organizations will be extremely competitive, but they do internships. Stanbic IBTC, our investment banking department, we do take interns, and some of those interns, sort of relationships they've built, they've excelled, they've distinguished themselves. For many of them, the doors are always open anytime they want to come back. So, again, internships, of course, good grades, academic grades, very important. For the investment banks, they go for the best minds. Certain accreditation. So, for instance, the CFA, I think it stands for I think it's a Chartered Financial Analyst. I think that's what CFA stands for. It's one of the most prestigious qualifications. When you have those sorts of qualifications, you have a leg in the room. Again, what other things can you do? For many of the investment banks as well, they organize or they attend all these career fairs that happen in universities. Again, this happened more abroad than in Nigeria, but I'm sure even in Nigeria, when I was in Ife, I think, KPMG, PwC, I mean, they're not investment banks per se, but they did come to talk to us, they came around. So maximize those opportunities, get out there, be in their faces, exchange cards, connect on LinkedIn. Like I said, social skills, networking, those things are so important. Sometimes people think, they're overplayed. Oh, networking, we've heard it so many times, but they're so important. So those are some of the tips, the tools I think, if you deploy, then of course you have an advantage. I hope.
Thank you so much. Thank you for actually going deep into that. I don't know if you still have time. I have a number of
I
seconds.
do. I do. I do.
Okay, okay.
Please go on.
All right. I will apologize on our behalf. I feel they want to access many things as they can, and I will just beg you to be patient. Okay. So,
That's
Olayinka Shadow, do you have a question?
Yes, I do, sir.
Okay, please go for it.
Good evening, Mr. Bella, and good evening to everyone.
good evening.
Foremost, I appreciate you for this very insightful session. It was very qualitative, and we examined the prospects, we examined the benefits of working as a lawyer in the banking sector, but it seems like we omitted something, and I would like that you touch on from your personal experience. So, what an observation, of course. What are some of the challenges that a person might encounter as working as a lawyer in the banking sector or in general the financial industry? So that is something that I would like to have an understanding about.
Thank you. Brilliant question. Immediately you started asking the question, I anticipated where you were going. Yeah, very, 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 very good question. So, the challenges and the downsides, again, there are always two sides to a coin. It's not all, roses. So one of the first challenge I'll start with doesn't apply only to banking. It applies more generally when you decide to go in-house. So when you say, I now want to work as in-house counsel for a corporate organization. And what is it? You potentially, it can potentially be limiting. And I think this is just by the very fact that when you're in a law firm, you have diverse clients in all sorts of industries. Today, you might be dealing with an acquisition. Tomorrow, you're researching on intellectual property. The next day, some case comes up. You're looking at case law, jacking the Nigerian weekly law report. The next day might be something on employment law. So that's the breadth and depth that a law firm gives. Just giving particularly when it's a full services law firm, and has different practice areas and different practice groups. When you go in-house, you have one client, which is your employer, and then, of course, your employer's clients. Now, your employer very likely will be operating in one sector or one industry. In the case of a bank, financial services. So we are seeing, a wide range of things potentially being narrowed. So the problem with going in-house generally is lawyers can become very insular. You then realize, if you're not careful, that all you know are the laws and regulations relating to that industry. All you read about, all the professional relationships you have are with bankers or with lawyers in other banks. You're not as involved or as active in the MBA, and all those sorts of things as before. So there's that risk, there's that downside, and the solution to that is to be very conscious of it and to be very deliberate in guarding against it. Now, with financial services, again, unlike other sort of industries, so for instance, if you became the in-house lawyer of a company of maybe in the FMCG space, the fast, moving consumer goods, space, again, it's not as narrow and specialist as financial services industry. So even within the narrower sphere, potentially you can move from that to another industry, to manufacturing, or to pharmaceuticals, as an in-house counsel. So there's that job mobility. It's a bit easier, but when you're in financial services, because of the very specialized and regulated industry it is, you could potentially get boxed in. And sometimes you find out that for people who get into financial services industry, they find out, in quotes, they're trapped. So the pay is relatively good. People eventually, there's a risk you can then get into a comfort zone, where you don't want to leave, you don't want to you don't want to make a jump into something else because you sort of set on a path, and it's a fairly straight and narrow path. So that's another challenge. In terms of other challenges, of course, being highly regulated, it can be a difficult environment. The regulators are always coming up with new regulations, sometimes not always business friendly. So again, sometimes you have to make very difficult decisions. Sometimes, you may feel like, your business is hampered or constrained by the regulatory environment. So, it is a tough regulatory environment, maybe now, than ever before. That's another challenge. And yeah, so those are some of the challenges and downsides I can think of, to a career in financial services or in banking more specifically.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, I find my voice always clashes like I'm on a studio or something. Okay. Is there someone else that has a question? I saw a hand, but I've forgotten the person. I was noting it, but I wasn't able to pick the person. Okay. Mr. Bella, you mentioned some professional associations, especially if someone wants to get more information on very niche financial services industries like the derivatives industry, where you mentioned there are very few derivative lawyers in Nigeria. And I want to know, if I want to participate in a group like that, how do I do that?
Okay, so what most of these associations do is they require you to be members in order to access the vast majority of the resources and the training and the programs that are available. However, non-members can also access some of these things. So, for instance, for the Loan Markets Association, on their website, when you go into their website, there's a lot of information that is publicly available, but then there's a members only section, which is where some of the documentation is stored. So in terms of memberships, for most of them, you can't be a member as an individual. It's typically corporate organizations or universities or corporate bodies that can sign up for membership, and many of them are paid memberships as well. So if you research them, is there LMA, just get on their website, look for the portal, or the tab relating to membership. You see a lot of information there about membership options available and subscription fees and all of that. And I think for a lot of people, what I would urge is, even if you don't become members of those organizations now, given you're still in school, when you do join law firms, when you qualify and join law firms or corporate banks or other corporate bodies, please ask your employers to sign up to membership of these organizations. There are lots and lots of resources that they have available to members. So there's always a huge advantage in your organization being a member of such associations.
All right. I think there is even a lot for me to learn myself, and as I go further, I will be able to learn more. And I think this class has been a monumental success. I like how everyone was around, how you were able to patiently go through things without sounding so high for us. Okay. So we are grateful you are here, Mr. Bella. Um, I think Clinton will do the class vote of thanks before we call it a day. So, Clinton,
Sorry, sir. I didn't get what you said, sir.
I said you do the vote of thanks for the class.
Oh. All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
We are very grateful for your time and everything, sir. We thank you for the insightful section, and I also thank everyone who's on there, and I also want to thank our lecturer for his resourcefulness and trying to bring it together. We really appreciate you, sir. Thank you very, very much. We are grateful.
Thank you very
So I think we
much.
can
It
call it
was
a day.
thank you so much. It was an absolute honor and privilege. I thoroughly enjoyed having this conversation. So thank you so much for having me, and
Oh, thank you
I
very
look
much, sir.
forward to connecting with the rest of you as well. Thank you.
Okay, so this is where we call it a day. I want to thank members of the law class for coming in and for making the invite open to other people. I appreciate everyone for making this evening a success. I will see you more when school resumes fully. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the holidays.
Thank you
Bye.
so
Thank you very much,
much.
sir.
Yeah.